Good evening. This is the Angry Capitalist doing this is episode 8. So this is the economic outlook for 2024. As of January, today's recording day is Friday, January 12th. It's almost 8 p.m. Most likely this will be uploaded on Saturday the 13th. All right, to start off, we recently had the CPI, or effectively the inflation data, come out for the U.S. So inflation is broken up into two numbers. The first number is headline, and the second number is core. So headline inflation, this is the Federal Reserve's way to measure inflation overall. Core inflation, that strips out more volatile things such as energy and food. So the headline inflation for the end of 2023, so this is for December end from 2022 all the way through 2023, has come in headline at 3.4%. Core inflation has come up a little bit higher at 3.9%. What does this really mean? So this goes in relationship to the Federal Reserve, interest rates, quantitative easing versus quantitative tightening. Within the talk today, I'll go over the monetary supply, both M1 and M2. This is how much money there is in the U.S. economy. That'll touch on the inflation numbers a bit, but it does also touch on interest rates. So in December, the Fed came out and said that they were looking to potentially cut interest rates in 2024. We then had these higher than expected inflation numbers come out. Maybe they'll keep holding at the higher interest rate level. Maybe they'll even increase. When it comes to guessing what interest rates are going to do, typically I don't pay as much attention to that until it actually happens. So inflation for 2023 was a bit hotter than it should have been. The Federal Reserve has an anticipation or a target of about 2% per year. So this is almost double what they're looking for still. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to the economic outlook going into 2024, in my mind, is median household income. So from 2021, we had a median household income. So this is if you were to stack all of the If you were to stack all of the different income levels that people are at in the U.S., and if you found the one in the middle, that would be your median. So it's not the average, it's not the mean. This is median. Boom, right in the middle, median. So in 2021, we had a median household income of $76,330. Going into 2023, as of November, that had dropped down to $74,580. So that is a 2.3% decline from 2021 to 2023. So inflation year over year has continued to go up at a fairly hot pace, but median household income has decreased. So not only are people's dollars losing purchasing power, but it looks like households at least are losing their income, whether this is due to layoff or people having to switch jobs, whatever the cause may be, not 100% certain, but we do know that the median is going down. Next, something that I try to keep an eye on is demographic trends. So currently we have the boomer generation, one of the largest generations in U.S. history, if not the largest, if I remember correctly, is on the path to retirement. The last boomer is anticipated to retire in 2030. So going into 2024, Currently 27, or as of the end of 2022, 27% of the US population was retired. Going into, we don't have the numbers for 2023 quite yet. I'm going to guess that that's like 30%. Additionally, when it does come to employment figures, so currently 40% of Americans are not working. That would be a combination mostly due to people retiring and also people who are out permanently from disability. So currently approximately 13% of Americans are deemed permanently disabled in such a way that they may not be working. Whether they have some kind of part-time job or a side hustle, that's entirely possible. If not likely, I encourage it. But approximately 14% or 13, my apologies, percent of Americans are out permanently from retirement. That gives us approximately 40% of Americans who are not contributing productively to the economy. That also does not include individuals who are full-time stay-at-home parents or people who are just discouraged from the workplace and they've given up. Going into 2024, going back to the boomers, we currently have an anticipated 4.4 million baby boomers who are expected to enter retirement in this year. So that means that the number of people who will be taken out of the workforce, out of productivity, who are going to start drawing down the retirement plans as well as their Social Security is expected to increase quite rapidly. Next, something to keep in mind, I'm not going to pull up the visual aid for this, but yield curves. So just as an update, the yield curve for bonds, for treasuries, is still inverted. This is commonly seen as a leading indicator for an economic recession. When the yield curve inverts, and then once it corrects and reverts, is usually aligned with the start of a recession. It's still inverted. It's going to have to revert someday. Who knows when that will be? I don't know. With that in mind, though, I would like to cover a few leading indicators that indicate a potential recession. Of course, this is a common hot topic. All right, let me go ahead here. Boom. Okay, there we go. So currently what I have pulled up is the chart for gross national income for the United States. So what this is effectively showing is the GNI for the economy. I find this to be a little bit more reliable than GDP. I'm not a huge fan of GDP. It's a very good measure. So GNI, formerly GNP, or gross national product, is the sum value added of all resident producers plus any product taxes, less subsidies, not included in the valuation of output, plus net receipts of primary income, compensation of employees, and property income from abroad. So the way to think of this is the total income for the whole of the US. So we can look at this chart. These sections here that are highlighted in gray, those denote various recessions throughout history. Going back to, when was this originally taken? Going back to about 1960. Now, looking at this graph, you will see three, almost four slight downturns, or really downturns in GNI. So back in the 80s, we had that long period of recession or stagflation, We have a slight downturn right there, super slight, kind of hard to see unless you're looking right at it. And then again in the 90s, right around 91, with the dot-com bust. And then we have this period right here in 01, or my apologies, that would have been in the, early 90s. My apologies, not the dot-com bust. That would have been the early 90s recession. Then we have 2001, there we go, the dot-com bust. We see that actually starts to tick down prior to 01 with the dot-com bust. And we have it come up and up and up. And it does in 06 going into 08. It does this kind of hump and then a sudden check mark down right to the tail end of the recession. So we have, 08 displayed here. Dip right down into 09. During 08 to 09, the Federal Reserve had done some quantitative easing via interest rates and monetary supply. Comes up 15, 16, a little bit of dip there, but nothing really to, write home about. And then, of course, we have 2019. Boom, big dip going into 21 with the pandemic. And then it shoots straight up after that. So this is more recent. Let me go ahead and adjust this to the 5-year. Come on, if it'll adjust. Okay, never mind. But point being here is that from 2020, at this point of the dip during the recession, it just goes up almost sharper than a 45-degree angle, actually. So we have the GNI drastically increase. Boom. There we go. There's the 5-year. Okay, here we go. So we can see it coming up after 2018, 2019, kind of dips down a bit, but not a whole lot. And then 2020, we have the flash recession right there, and it keeps going up after that into 2022. So this drastic increase in GNI is something to keep an eye on. Okay, we're now going to stop sharing, and I will switch screens. Over to let's take a look at the GNP. This goes back further into history. So with the GNP, let's let this adjust a bit. There we go. So with the GNI, that was really put into place. We had the data from 1960 forward with GNP, gross national product. This goes back, into back into the early to mid 40s. Let's get the descriptor here to set the descriptor on this one. Okay, so this is effectively the total product output of the U.S. And this is real, so it's not. It hasn't been overly revised or anything, which, in my estimation, can throw off our use of those numbers if it's been overly manipulated. So this has been taken quarterly. It has not been adjusted, or actually, I know it has been at the seasonally adjusted rate. Okay, so going back once again, we can see, the dips in GNP tend to align with various periods of economic recession. So once again, we've got the early 70s. We've got the recession in 73 to 74. Now, one thing to keep in mind, while not a major chart is just for ease of use, we do see, these kind of peaks right before it starts to slide down. Peak and then a downslide, peak, a downslide. Point being is just because GNI or GNP are going up, that doesn't really mean anything. So GNI and GNP are both what we could refer to as a lagging indicator, meaning that we get the numbers for GNP and GNI, GDP as well, way after the fact. So, maybe 3 months in the past when we're getting these numbers out for their current rates. Excuse me. Additionally, some of these type of numbers, as we're getting them out right now for our current time, we do frequently get revised numbers. So keep an eye out when it comes to this kind of thing, when they're talking about stuff in the news, whether it be employment figures or even the inflation index, occasionally gets revised after a month. I find that to be a bit strange that it gets revised down so frequently for various things. It's more just indicative that the people who are putting the numbers out, the government, whoever, are manipulating those figures to hide stuff from the public. So once again, looking at 08 is a good example. Let's see if we can get this switched over to the 5-year. Might take a minute or two. Okay, I'll start top. There we go. Boom. So going back before 08, looking at more recent figures once again, pandemic, boom, the GNP dropped significantly, shot back up, and that kind of keeps trucking upward. So keep in mind when you're looking at these figures, these are a lagging indicator. It's a good idea to kind of keep that in mind when anyone is talking about how the economy is doing. If they reference GNP, GNI, GDP, you're not going to know what is going on right now or what's going to happen in the future based off those numbers. You have to remember, when we get these numbers out, you're looking in the rearview mirror. You're not looking ahead of you. That's why it's called a lagging indicator. So let's go ahead and stop sharing this. So keep this in mind. We've got this going up and up and up for both GNP as well as GNI. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and stop sharing screen. Now we're going to look at the M1, M2 money supply. Share screen, tab. And this is all data that you can find and pull up for yourself from the St. Louis Fed. Or if you just type in, GNP, GNI, M1, M2, Fred, that'll pull it right on up for you. Okay, here we go. So the M1 money supply. What is M1 and what is M2? First, we'll just check out M1. So this is one of those things whereby you want to check out what exactly it consists of, because adjustments and changes do get made in the way this stuff is measured. So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, so before May of 2020, M1 consists of currency outside the US Treasury, Federal Reserve banks, and the vaults of depository institutions, demand deposits at commercial banks, excluding those amounts held by depository institutions, the US government, and foreign banks and official institutions, less cash items in the process of collection and Federal Reserve float, other checkable deposits, consisting of no negotiable order of withdrawal or now, and automatic transfer service or ATS, account depository institutions, shared draft accounts, credit unions, and demand deposits at thrift institutions. So effectively, the M1 is like it's like your checking, your savings accounts, those kinds of things. And beginning of May 2020, M1 consists of currency outside the US Treasury, Federal Reserve banks, vaults of depository institutions, demand deposits at commercial banks, excluding those amounts held by depository institutions, the US government, and foreign banks and official institutions. Same. Okay, here we go. Less cash items in the process of collection and Federal Reserve float, and 3 other liquid deposits consisting of OCDs and saving deposits, including money market accounts. Seasonally adjusted M1 is constructed by summing currency and demand deposits and OCDs. Before May 20, and other liquid deposits beginning May 20, each seasonally adjusted separately. So effectively, what I got from this is that the best way to describe it is because of some of the craziness going on with the transactions, with the Federal Reserve putting money out to the economy, they made some changes to the way that was calculated to adjust for the helicopter money, so to speak, as well as to remove items that were in the process of collection. So that would be, those funds which were going to be collected or transferred or were owed. As well as to separate money market accounts and stuff. So separating the M1 and the M2 can be kind of tricky. Personally, I prefer the M2 as an economic indicator, especially as a leading economic indicator. But just being able to look at this, in my estimation, it kind of shows the craziness, the situation that we're in. So, looking back historically, M1 goes back into 1960, or 59, but 1960s. We have this super even and flat rate of M1 relative to the greater economic picture, slowly and steadily increasing. So, this is even through various periods of inflation. We have 2008. And then it starts to pick up after 2008. So if you look right about here from 2008 to 2020, we see the steepening increase in the M1 money supply. Effectively, despite all the craziness that happened with 2008, money creation just increased. this was a problem even before the big cough and all the money printing that took place in 2020, which we see here. Within people who are either in the academic field of economics or people who are deeply involved in monetary policy, whether it be for stock accounts, trading, general business purpose, this was still something that was talked about quite severely and quite frequently. And then, boom, we hit 2020. So keep in mind that this is addressed in billions of dollars. In October of 2008, we were looking at 1,473 billion. In November 2019, we were looking at 3,949 billion. So that's more like trillions, really. And then, boom, May of 2020, 16,244 billion. And then it continues to shoot up, albeit not quite as steeply, going into 2021. Coming to a peak in 2022, in about spring of 2022, April to June, at 20,533 billions. And then, boom, slopes down, drops down pretty steeply, going into March of 2023, down to 18,938. And this is right when this point right here where I have my cursor on that's displayed, March, April. That is when we had the bank failures of Silicon Valley Bank. But the M1 still continues to go down, not quite as sharply, but it still does continue to fall. Let's see if we can get this adjusted to the 5-year for the M1 money supply. Is it gonna play game? Can play ball. Page unresponsive. Okay. There we go. Boom. Now it responds. So here we can see January 2019. Rona, helicopter money, boom. Doesn't look quite as dramatic, but it still is a pretty significant decrease. So keep this in mind. We're looking at the M1 money supply now. The M1 money supply is contracting. All right, let's go ahead and look at the M2. M2, there we go. Boom. Okay, here we go. So pretty similar to the M1, although this is a little bit steeper. And we can kind of see this more closely, in my mind, mirrors the GNI. So M2. So once again, we do have the revision for M2. So before May of 2020, M2 consists of M1 plus savings deposits. So these are like your CDs, your money markets, small to no denomination time deposits. Once again, CDs, time deposits in amounts of less than 100,000, less individual retirement account, IRA, balances at depository institutions, and balances in retail money market funds, MMFs, less IRA, and co-balances. So this includes like your savings deposits, your money market accounts, small denomination time deposits. So these would be like your CDs that are in amounts less than 100,000. Part of the reason for going with the smaller denomination, and this is to get more of an idea about the consumers, as well as various businesses account balances. So one way that I would look at and think of the M1 and the M2 is the total liquidity, the total cash in the economic system. And we can compare that to the economy, to the GNI, to the GNP. And we can look at the economy is this big and there's this much cash in ratio to it. And the ratio between the cash and the size of the economy can tell you a lot about how it's doing. If we had the graph pulled up to show the Great Depression as an example, we would see the another way it's called is the Great Contraction. We would see the GNP or GNI drastically increase, and the monetary supply stays the same, if not decreases. That's one of the things that mostly caused the Great Depression, was the money supply didn't keep up with the economy, and the economy corrected down the money supply. So beginning May of 2020, M2 consists of M1 plus small denomination time deposits. Time deposits less than 100,000, less IRA and co-balances. Balances in retail money market funds, less IRA and co-balances at MMF. Seasonally adjusted M2 is constructed by summing saving deposits before May of 2020, small denomination time deposits, and retail money market funds. Each seasonally adjusted separately, and adding this result to seasonally adjusted M1. So M2 takes all of your M1, meaning cash in like checking accounts, various things like that, as well as savings deposits, money market funds, and small denomination time deposits, CDs, that kind of thing, money market funds. And also removes the balances of IRA money market funds. One reason why they're likely going to remove the balances for IRA, and I can't even pronounce that. I believe that may be for like your 401k. One reason why they'll remove those is the balances in your IRA for a time deposit fund or a money market fund, that's not really going to affect the economy in terms of liquidity very much compared to something that could be cashed out at any point, or something that as soon as it matures and gets converted to cash in a savings account, as an example, will then go boom right back into the economy, adding to liquidity in another form. Whereas if it's held up in an IRA, it's a little bit less liquid. It could be redeposited to another fund, or maybe into some stocks or equities in that retirement account. But unless it goes to maturity and gets transferred out of the IRA, it's not really going to add a whole lot to the economy in terms of spending. So if we look at the M2 shows a little bit of a clearer picture regarding the total money supply in the U.S. economy. Whereas the M1, we had this very narrow, very kind of consistent increase in the monetary supply. We do see this go up pretty much in line with the inflation rate. And yeah, 2007, we have the recession right through here. One sec. Go and shut down my alarm. It is dinner time, but I fed my boys dinner before doing this video. So yeah, we have the recession occur, and boom, we have this little bitty uptick right here in 08 as the Federal Reserve increased the money supply via QE, via reducing interest rates, down increase almost at a 45-degree angle of the boom 2020, the pandemic hits. This increase in the money supply right here doesn't look quite as drastic as the M1. Partially that could be just because this is evened out a little bit more with the different forms of liquidity that exist, not just, your checking account balance, that kind of thing. But boom, we still do see this drastic increase in the M2. See it increase, same time period duration, getting into March of 2022. And then it starts to come down. We have this same little tick mark right here in 2023, March, April of 2023, which lines up with the bank failures. Once again, referencing Silicon Valley Bank. And it keeps going down, but not quite as sharply. Okay, let's see if we can adjust this down to the 10-year. All right, this may take a moment for it to go ahead and just, there we go. Okay. So now we're looking at the 10-year. We can look all the way back to, 2014. And once again, we've got this really strong increase, pretty rapid, still even looking at the 10-year average of the M2 money supply. Comes up, keeps going up into about January, February, March of 2022. Starts to come down pretty rapidly. Boom, we hit March, April of 2023, and it levels off. Still decreasing, but not nearly as rapidly. But the main thing that I recommend keeping in mind is when we talk about leading indicators versus lagging indicators, let's get this back to its max. Stop sharing. Let's go ahead and look back at the, close out the M1, just to give us a little bit more bandwidth here, so to speak. Present. Share screen. Chrome tab. Share. Put it back on max for the GNI. Boom, there we go. So once again, looking at the GNI, goes up pretty significantly. And the thing with the GNI, right, is if you look at this at the max level coming from 1960 to 2022, this keeps going up. And I'm going to keep my eye open to get the numbers for 2023. And one thing also to keep in mind is the frequency at which this is measured. So the GNI is measured annually. So it's measured for the year totals, so to speak. But even going into, 08, 07, We have 08 right here, dips down going into 09. Federal Reserve adds liquidity. The market expands. Hit 2019 going into 2020. It dips back down and then it shoots back up as liquidity, as money is added to the economic system in the US. Stop sharing. Let's go back to the M2. Kind of going back and forth here just to demonstrate this and to know that the money supply, really to hammer home that it can kind of tell you where you're going with your GNI. And then also, yeah, so the frequency for the GNI is also taken monthly. Once again, the M2 is taken monthly, not GNI. My apologies. So yeah, this is a leading indicator. And let's see, where's 2022? So we can almost look at this, right? And the GNI was last taken for 2022. And then as soon as we get into 2023, which we have the M2 data for, that's going down, So what's the GNI going to do? Typically in history, GNI is going to track behind your money supply. Whether just because, the GNI is lagging behind the M2, because the M2 leading indicator of what's going on, it's measured more frequently. And also your money supply is going to affect the economy, whereas the economy doesn't have as much of an effect on the money supply. But also just, we're measuring this more frequently. We know that the supply decreased pretty significantly in 2023. So was the GNI actually decreasing during that same time period? That's a good question, good thing to think about. But I would certainly say though that if we look at this historically, the M2 is a good leading indicator to tell you what direction the economy is going to go in. It makes a very strong case in my mind for a recessionary environment. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I didn't bring this up whatsoever, is the government expenditures. So the federal government does put liquidity into the economy, and it is something to keep an eye on, both because it can lead to inflation. It also can act as surrogate QE, meaning quantitative easing outside of the Federal Reserve. And yeah, boom, case in point, here we go. 2008 hits, various spending bills come out. We see the government expenditures shoot up, and they kind of dip back down and then shoot back up. 2020, boom, government just throws money at the problems, and we see that continue to happen. And we do have the government continuing to spend money going into 2023. And we do have the federal government current expenditures tracked quarterly. So the government's continuing to spend money, but we do know that the M2 money supply decreased. GNI, at least in 2022, was increasing quite rapidly. Taking all this data together, we can make some inferences and know that this is one of the reasons why people so frequently call for recession or say that we're due for recession is just because, hey, look, the leading indicators of the M2 money supply, it's correcting downward. GNI will probably follow the M2. Additionally, going back to the yield curve for bonds, I'm not even going to try and have that run at the moment. My internet here is kind of struggling, but the yield curve is still inverted. It's been inverted for quite a while. And once it reverts is usually the start of a recession. So we have these multiple leading indicators indicating to us that, hey, trouble's on the horizon. Bringing that back in, a few of those other points that I'd hit on earlier, we do have median household income is median, once again, middle median. Household income from 2023 to 2021, or 2021, my apologies, to 2023, is decreasing, has decreased about 2.3%. And we do have about 40% of the U.S. workforce permanently out of the workforce due to both retirement as well as full-time disability status. And once again, bringing it back to the beginning, inflation data, core inflation, still at 3.9%, way higher than the Federal Reserve wants. They're likely to keep monetary policy quite tight. So I'll continue to do updates on this. I'm thinking every month, maybe every other month. Just go ahead and whenever we have any kind of a change in the economy or change in the numbers, both lagging and leading indicators, I'd like to go ahead and do an update on this kind of thing. Let me know what you thought down below of this format. What are your thoughts on the economy going into 2024? Keep in mind demographic trends. What are your thoughts on that? Is there anything that you're aware of? Is there any piece of news that you've come across that's either very reassuring in the sense that, hey, everything's hunky-dory, it'll be fine? Or have you come across some piece of news or some piece of data that's like, hey, check this out. It's not looking too good ahead. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to actually hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, please do go ahead and subscribe. Ring the bell so you get various updates. And have a good one. Take care.